Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today I want to share my luxury care guide, especially as I've been adding more luxury ready-to-wear pieces to my collection. I've had these questions myself. I've had other people ask me about dry cleaning and taking care of a lot of these luxury items. So I collected my best 10 tips for luxury care. They span across ready-to-wear, handbags, shoes, pretty much everything, but there are a lot of good tidbits, especially for ready-to-wear, that I want to share. I think that's the most nebulous area overall. If you're tuning in for the first time, hi, I'm Katie. I like to do these luxury fashion videos here on YouTube. I share hauls and reviews, but at the end of the day, I share my journey so that we can all mindfully curate our own collections. So if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below with your favorite part. It all really means a lot to me. Like I said, I had 10 tips to get through, which if you know me, you know I can babble on and on and on. So I really don't want this to be a 35-minute video. So I'm going to roll through them really quickly. A lot of these tips don't only apply to luxury items. They can apply to any other piece that you have at home already. So keep that in mind as well. But because a lot of times luxury items have a higher price tag, so people do want to make sure they take care of them properly and stuff like that. So that's why it's sort of geared towards those luxury items. So the first and foremost tip that came to my mind is actually dry cleaning your items the first couple of times. Now, this might seem really obvious. You're like, oh yeah, I assumed all ready-to-wear gets dry cleaned. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of times, the pieces that you have don't have to be dry cleaned. You should read the care label on each garment, and that will give you more insight on how you should really be taking care of your piece. But what I like to do is, even if the garment does not explicitly say it needs to be dry cleaned, I like to dry clean it a few times, maybe 2 to 3 times, before I start washing it at home. And I think this really helps keep the structure of your garment. I think for some people, dry cleaning their ready-to-wear is what they want to do and makes sense for them. And I think that's totally fine. For me personally, I don't like to dry clean all of my clothes. It just seems like the maintenance for a lot of my clothing items then would go up so significantly. And that's why I wanted to share examples of pieces that I would only dry clean, pieces that I would dry clean a few times before I start washing them at home, and then pieces that I might, just wash from home from the beginning. So for example, I have this Chanel bat sleeve blouse, I like to call it, and this is a very thin silk piece. This is a dry clean always and only kind of piece. I do not think I have the right tools to be able to take care of this at home. So this is always going to be, something like this is always going to be a dry clean only piece. Now you might think, oh my gosh, does that mean you have to dry clean it every single time you wear it? No. So dry cleaning and any kind of washing for garments actually sort of chips away and kind of wears at the fibers, the fabric itself. And so even for dry cleaning, if it actually is dry cleaned, properly dry cleaned, no water is used and it's all chemical solvent that gets used. So even the dry cleaners don't recommend dry cleaning your clothes after a single wear, unless something's been spilled on it or things like that. So to also make sure that the clothing piece itself doesn't get sweat on it and stuff like that, a lot of times I will wear tank tops or something underneath that adds an extra layer between my skin and the garment, which also makes sure that your piece stays pretty fresh for longer. You don't have to feel compelled to dry clean it after a single wear. I don't. I usually will wear it for a season. Of course, this all depends on how much you were sweating and where you went and all of that stuff. But considering average use, I will usually just wear a piece pretty much for a season and then dry clean it at the end of that season to make sure that it gets stored away pretty fresh. Something like this is a contender for dry cleaning a few times and then starting to wash at home. Now, the tag for this one does technically say gentle dry clean only, but the composition is 100% cotton. So I'm likely to take this as a dry cleaned piece for the first few times, and then after that I will probably start washing it at home on the gentle cycle. I will make sure that these little embellishments up top are pretty much covered up so that they don't get damaged. But because I know it's 100% cotton composition, I'm not too afraid to wash it at home. This is something that should be able to be washed at home. I just like to take it to the dry cleaners to make sure that this kind of shape is well preserved before I start doing that. And then there are also just straight t-shirt items like this that are also 100% cotton. For these kinds of items, I'm not too concerned just washing these on a gentle cycle at home from the beginning. They are a t-shirt composition. It is 100% cotton. So this is something that would probably get dry cleaned from the get-go. My second tip is to actually leave your handbags outside of their boxes. So to store them outside of the box so that they have good contact with like good airflow. I have a mix of my handbags either in dust bags or just out on their own. In general, you want to store your bags outside of the box. That's to ensure that they have good contact with air and then there's airflow so the leather itself can breathe. If you store them in the boxes, sometimes they can get, if there's any kind of moisture or humidity like trapped in that box and there's no airflow, then that can do some damage onto your actual leather. If you have patent leather pieces, that can be what makes them a little bit tacky. So you do want to store your bags kind of out in the open rather than being like totally confined in a box. All right, my third tip is to always use a layer of felt in between layers of leather. So for example, this is one of my handbags. I store it in the dust bag like this, but as you can see, there is a layer of felt that's in between the flap, and that's to ensure that the flap doesn't for some reason end up sticking to and like combining with the bottom of the bag. When you purchase Chanel bags, a lot of times they will already come with this felt. Even if it didn't come with the felt, you can always get a piece of felt fabric and add it in between the layers as well. But this will prevent your bags, your leather from sticking to each other. It will prevent any sort of color transfer that can happen from bags that might be stacked next to each other. My next tip is to always use the correct hangers for the type of item you're trying to store in your closet. This pertains predominantly to ready-to-wear pieces, of course. I'm going to bring my examples back. So even when it comes to tops, there are tops that will need thicker hangers than others. And so you'll see this Chanel piece, because it is a blouse and I don't want this whole piece to get like reduced to a really flat silhouette, I have used the thicker Chanel hanger to help it maintain its shape. It's also not really a structured piece. It is one that's going to drape on the hanger itself. So that's also why I made sure I use the one that has a little bit of width. On the other hand, the Louis Vuitton t-shirt, you can see it's on one of those really thin like velvet hangers. It can always go on a thicker hanger, but I feel like t-shirts don't necessarily have to be. There's less structural integrity that's going to be lost by putting it on a thinner hanger like this compared to something like a blazer, a jacket, a blouse. Like those are ones that need to have those shoulders really looked after. But t-shirts can pretty much can be hung on thinner hangers, in my opinion. And so that's how I store mine. Most of my t-shirts are on thin ones, and then all my jackets and blouses are on thicker hangers. You definitely need thicker hangers for your jackets and your blazers, so do not, like, otherwise your whole shoulder area is just going to get compromised. It's not going to maintain that same kind of fit and like angle that you want when you wear those kinds of items, so make sure you have the right hangers for those. I usually like to ask when I get ready to wear pieces to get the right hangers. So for my bottoms, I'll always ask for a bottoms hanger, and for my tops, I'll always ask for a hanger, unless I know that I don't have this space in my closet. Like for this Louis Vuitton piece, I passed on a hanger because I knew they only had the really thick ones and I didn't have space for that, and I didn't want another cumbersome, really thick Louis Vuitton hanger. So I opted not to get one then, but most of the time I will ask the boutique for a hanger and use that particular hanger to hang up my piece. I think pants and skirts can either be folded or hung up. I prefer to hang up my pants and skirts as much as I can, as much as I have space for it. If it's a material that I know won't show crease marks as much, then I'll go ahead and leave that folded and put it in a dresser. But if it is something that either has like a lot of pleats or will show a lot of like crease marks, then I will use pants hangers for those bottoms. My next tip is specifically for bottoms. So these are pants or skirts. When you're using those pant clip hangers, they can leave marks on your items. So this is actually an example of what not to do, but this is a Zara skirt and I couldn't be bothered. So I just put it on a like cheapy kind of plastic hanger that I just had lying around. I'm going to take this off and I'll also do a close-up, but you might be able to see that there are crease marks on the garment itself, and that comes from the clip that's holding on to the pants. Now, if you don't use these kinds of cheapy ones and you have different hangers, you can often minimize the impact that you get from those like clip marks. But I think the best way to prevent that is actually by putting, again, like another piece of felt or another piece of fabric that's pretty thick in between your pants and your pant hanger, or your garment and the hanger. So you add it in as an extra kind of layer of protection before you clamp on the hanger. If you can't be fussed to have the extra layer of fabric, then the other option you can do is to turn your garment inside out, and that's how and then like clamp the hanger onto the clothes inside out. Sometimes you can still get residual marks on the other side, but a lot of times the marks will be left on the inside, and then you won't see it when you wear your garment the right side out. So you can always turn it inside out as well. So my next tip is to always wash your garments in garment bags. By garment bags, I mean these kinds of like mesh bags, and they come in all sorts of different sizes. A lot of times they'll come in different shapes. Like there are ones that are better shaped for like your bra, and there are bigger like square ones like this that are meant for like your pants. There are smaller sizes that are meant for your shirts. I always think it's a good idea to wash your items in these mesh bags. Otherwise, some other item that's in the washing machine can snag on something else. And you know, there's like lots of movement that happens inside a washing machine. So that minimizes any kind of abrasion or friction that can happen between the garments. It also protects your item from the walls of the washing machine itself. So that's why I always recommend you use these when you wash your items. If you guys have no idea what I'm talking about for some of these items, I will leave links to them in the description box down below. They will either be items that I use or items that are very similar to the ones that I use, so that you can see them, like look into it, do more research and stuff like that. My next tip, I think we're on tip 7, is to use the appropriate laundry detergent. This for me applies mostly to delicate wash, because a lot of times the luxury ready-to-wear that I have will require a gentle wash or a delicate wash cycle. I like to use the Laundress, the delicate wash. That's the one that I've been using for years now. And I know that this is also good to use on washable silks, because if you watched my like Mother's Day gift guide, I mentioned the silk pillowcases that are machine washable, and I use this detergent for that as well. And everything comes out okay. Like nothing's like ruined, nothing's shrunken or anything like that. So this is my favorite delicate wash that I know works and doesn't do any kind of damage to the actual clothing that's getting washed. So I highly recommend. Even if it's not this one though, you will want to be mindful of the wash that you use for your ready-to-wear pieces, the ones that you are washing yourself. A lot of times for a delicate cycle, you can also use like Woolite. If there are sweaters that you're looking to wash, then Woolite can be good for that too. So you'll just want to be mindful. I don't like having, 15 different laundry detergents. I think it's a little bit too complicated, which is why I like to use just this one delicate wash for pretty much everything, and then have my like regular wash for all my other clothes. A lot of times I'll get questions on whether I choose to protect my handbags. A lot of times the questions are for handbags, whether they're leather handbags, silk fabric, satin, or anything. I'll get a lot of questions whether I will use some sort of protectant. I don't spray protect my handbags. I like to use them kind of the way they are, and I'm pretty mindful and careful of where I place them and put them and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned about that, but I will spray protect a lot of my shoes. And this is what I use for that. I use this primarily for like suede shoes because I feel like those are the most prone to getting really dirty really fast. Polynil Carbon Pro spray to protect shoes. And I think it's the best solution, like the best option to protecting your shoes. I believe you can also spray this on handbags. I haven't done that. That's just my personal preference, but that's something to note. If you wanted to try it out, you can always spray like a small corner at the bottom of your bag to make sure nothing dramatically bad happens to it, and then continue to spray to the rest. But otherwise, I recommend this for shoes. My 9th tip is for storing costume jewelry. And for costume jewelry, unlike handbags, I do recommend that you store them in the dust bag or the pouch that they've come in and try to keep them away from air. Because a lot of times costume jewelry is not made of finer materials like gold. They can sort of oxidize a little bit more if they are exposed to the open air or the oxygen in the air. So I like to store those in the dust bags that they came in, and oftentimes in the box that they came in. This is the opposite of handbags because you want to minimize the amount of air that's like flowing around them so that they don't rust. My 10th tip, and this is like the worst case scenario, something actually happened to your bag. Nobody wants to imagine this scenario, but I do want to share this tip so that you know what to do if it happens to you. So if you are to get something spilled onto your bag, usually the best thing to do at that moment is to dab away any excess moisture from whatever has spilled. If you know that it's like water or most likely going to be water, then just dab away the excess. Dab, don't rub, because that's going to spread it wider. Just try to dab away most of the excess and let it dry in the shade, and for the most part it should be fine. It shouldn't really leave a watermark. I haven't had that happen for any of my bags, thankfully, where a watermark is where it leaves like a little kind of rim around the area that was wet. It shouldn't. If you've removed a lot of the excess, it really shouldn't do that, but it can happen, I think, if there was something else in that moisture that hit your bag. If in the instance that something, the thing that dripped onto your bag was actually like oil based, I've had that happen too, where I was eating food and the food just like fell onto my bag. It was horrific. And I actually didn't find out until like hours later. That was also terrible. You can use corn flour to actually take away the excess oil that fell onto your bag. It doesn't always take it away 100%. I won't say that it works like 100%, but it will take out the most of it where you won't really see too much of a kind of mark left afterwards. It's really messy, but it works, and it takes a lot of times and a lot of tries to kind of rub the cornstarch. Did I call it corn flour earlier? I meant to say cornstarch, but you can rub the cornstarch into the area, like the grease stain, if you will, and it will pick up a lot of the excess oil. If that happens, if anything ever drops onto your bag, the first thing that you should immediately think about doing is removing any excess moisture that's there. And then if it's water, let it dry. If it's like an oil-based item, I would also sort of let that dry, but you can always start putting cornstarch on it sooner in hopes that it will draw away the excess oil. I pray no one ever has to use that knowledge ever, but I think it's good knowledge to have in case it does happen. So those are my 10 luxury care tips. They spanned across kind of bags, ready-to-wear shoes, all sorts of things. So I hope you found it helpful. These are tips that I've sort of picked up along the way, but if you have any other tips that you'd like to share, definitely let me know in the comments section down below. A lot of it's been through some trial and error, so if we can all share any more good information we have, that will be great. If you try out any of these items and you feel like it's made a difference, also let me know, because I like to know that I'm not the only crazy person who feels like these tips have helped. If you have any questions on any of these items or really anything at all, feel free to leave those down below or head on over to Instagram and I'd be happy to help however I can. If you like this video and you found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate all of your feedback and support. If you like this kind of content and you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I post new fashion related videos every Sunday and Wednesday. So until next time,